Either give us the $86,000 or get out, you worthless piece of trash. When I said no, Dad slapped me in front of 200 guests. I smiled and whispered, "You just lost me." 24 hours later, they begged, "I'm James, I'm 35, and my own father threw a cup of hot coffee in my face and slapped me in front of 200 people for refusing to pay for my brother's wedding." Before I tell you how that slap ended up costing him millions and his reputation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all happened at my brother Michael's engagement party. The air in the Westlake Country Club ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet money. 200 guests, all friends of my parents or my fiancé's wealthy parents, mingled under crystal chandeliers, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. I stood near the bar, nursing a club soda, feeling like a ghost at my own family's celebration. My father, Richard, found me there. He didn't walk, he marched. At 60, he was still an imposing figure, with a full head of silver hair and a stare that could make corporate executives wither. Tonight, that stare was aimed at me. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and tight. He didn't wait for an answer, just grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a slightly more secluded alcove. The murmur of the party faded, but I knew dozens of eyes were still on us. My family loved drama, as long as they were in control of it. "I'm not asking again, James," he hissed. "The venue needs the final payment by noon tomorrow, $86,000. Give me your card." I kept my voice even, trying not to let the whole room in on our family's dirty laundry. "Dad, I told you, I can't. My company's capital is tied up. Every spare dollar is in machinery and payroll. I don't have that kind of liquid cash." His face, already flushed with wine, darkened to a dangerous shade of red. "Don't lie to me. Your Aunt Carol told us all about your so-called success. Don't you dare embarrass this family. Michael deserves this wedding. Michael deserves a wedding he can afford," I said, my own patience wearing thin. "This isn't a wedding. It's a theatrical production." That's when he snapped. All pretense of quiet conversation vanished. His voice boomed across the ballroom, silencing everything. "Either give us the $86,000 or get out. You worthless piece of trash." The silence was deafening. 200 pairs of eyes were glued on us. I saw my brother Michael, the golden child, look away, pretending to be fascinated by an ice sculpture. I saw my mother, Mary, clutch her pearls, a perfect portrait of a suffering matriarch. "No," I said, my voice clear in the stillness. The world seemed to move in slow motion. He picked up his coffee cup from a nearby table. It wasn't just coffee. It was hot. I saw the steam rising from it. He threw it. The dark, burning liquid splashed across my face and chest, soaking the front of my white shirt. The shock of the heat was followed by a sharp, stinging pain. And then, his hand came across my face. The slap was so hard my head whipped to the side, and the sound of it cracked through the silent room like a gunshot. My cheek was on fire. The smell of coffee was overwhelming. But through the pain and the humiliation, a strange calm washed over me. The final thread that had tied me to their expectations had just been severed. I turned back to face him. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. I didn't smile. I just looked into his eyes, and with a voice that was barely a whisper, I said, "You just lost me." Then, I turned around and walked away. I walked right through the stunned crowd, past my horrified mother, past my cowardly brother, and out the grand doors of the country club, leaving a trail of dripping coffee behind me on the pristine marble floor. I didn't know it then, but that walk was the first step into my new life. The bomb had just gone off, and the fallout was going to be more spectacular than any of them could have ever imagined. To understand why I could walk away so calmly, you need to understand that the slap wasn't a beginning. It was an ending. It was the final, ugly punctuation mark on a 35-year-long story of being the family disappointment. My brother Michael was the golden child. I was the scapegoat. It had always been that way. He was 2 years younger, but he was the one my father saw as his successor. Michael was easygoing, handsome in a conventional way, and he followed the path my father laid out for him without question. business degree from my father's alma mater, then straight into a management position at a respectable, boring corporation. He was a reflection of my father. I was different. I wasn't difficult, but I was curious. I didn't want to manage people. I wanted to build things. My brain worked in gears and circuits, in stress tolerances and fluid dynamics. I loved the smell of motor oil and hot metal. To my father, a man who lived in a world of profit margins and shareholder meetings, this was a foreign language. And he had no interest in learning it. I remember it so clearly, the moment I understood my place in the family hierarchy. I was 15. It was the regional high school science fair. For 3 months, I had poured my heart and soul into my project. A fully functional, miniature internal combustion engine I'd built from scratch using parts I'd scrounged from junkyards and saved up my allowance to buy. It was my masterpiece. It was loud, it was greasy, and it worked perfectly. My father was a judge that year, a guest of honor. He walked down the aisles of projects, smiling and shaking hands. When he got to my table, his smile tightened. He circled the engine once, his expensive suit jacket kept at a safe distance. "What is this, James?" he asked, not with curiosity, but with a kind of weary disdain. "It's a single-piston engine, Dad," I said, my voice buzzing with pride. "I designed the cooling system myself. See how the—" He held up a hand, cutting me off. "It's noisy," he said, "and it's leaking something on the tablecloth." He didn't ask a single question about how it worked. He didn't acknowledge the blue ribbon the other judges had already pinned to the display board. His eyes scanned the gymnasium, and then he said, "I have to go congratulate your brother." I watched him walk away. Across the gym, Michael was standing with his basketball team, holding a plastic trophy for runner-up, Division C. It was a participation trophy, basically. My father clapped Michael on the shoulder, laughing, posing for a picture with him and that cheap piece of plastic. My working engine, my blue ribbon, my 3 months of labor, none of it mattered. In that moment, I realized I could invent a machine that ran on water, and my father would still be more impressed if Michael learned to tie a new kind of knot in his tie. That was the pattern for the next 20 years. When I got a full scholarship for mechanical engineering at a top state university, my father said, "A state school. Michael is aiming for the Ivy League." When Michael got into an Ivy League school, with the help of a hefty donation from my father, they threw a party. After college, I told them my plan. I wanted to start my own business, a specialized engineering firm that designed custom parts for the aerospace and automotive industries. I had a business plan, I had prototypes, I had passion. My mother, Mary, just wrung her hands. "Oh, James, that sounds so risky. Why can't you get a safe job like your brother? He has a 401k. My father was more blunt. "You'll fail within a year," he said over a Thanksgiving dinner. "You have no head for business. You're a tinkerer, not an executive." They refused to give me a loan. Not a gift, a loan. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for the same kind of support they'd given Michael his entire life. The answer was a flat no. The only person who believed in me was Gerald. Gerald was my college mentor, a retired Boeing engineer who saw something in me that my own father couldn't or wouldn't. He was a quiet, brilliant man with hands permanently stained with grease and a mind as sharp as a laser cutter. He reviewed my business plan, asked me 100 tough questions, and then, at the end of it, he wrote me a personal check for $50,000. "This isn't a gift, son," he said, looking at me over the top of his glasses. "It's an investment. Don't you dare lose my money." It was the most fatherly thing anyone had ever said to me. For the next 10 years, I worked. I poured everything I had into my company. There were years I lived on ramen noodles and slept on a cot in my workshop. I faced setbacks, dealt with competitors, and navigated the brutal landscape of a startup. But slowly, painstakingly, it started to work. I hired my first employee, then my 5th, then my 20th. We started landing bigger and bigger contracts. We weren't a giant corporation, but we were known in the industry for quality and innovation. I wasn't a billionaire, but I was comfortable. I was proud of what I had built with my own 2 hands. Meanwhile, Michael was living the life my father had designed. He drove a company car, had a corner office, and married a woman from a good family. And now that wedding was on the horizon. It started subtly. A call from my mom. James, darling, your father and I are getting the house painted for the wedding reception we're hosting. We're a little short this month. Could you possibly help with, say, $3,000? For the family. I paid it. It was easier than arguing. A week later, a call from Michael. Hey bro, we found the perfect wedding attire, but it's a bit more than we budgeted. You're doing so well, we were wondering if you could spot us $5,000? I'll pay you back. I knew he wouldn't, but I paid it. I told myself it was for the sake of peace. Then came the call from my Aunt Carol. Carol was my father's sister, a woman who always seemed to be on my side. She'd call to check in, ask about my business, and sigh sympathetically about how my father just didn't understand. Oh, James, she said, her voice dripping with concern. I just had lunch with your father. You know how he is. He's so proud of you, he can't stop bragging to everyone. He's telling everyone at the country club that his son is a millionaire genius. He's laying it on a bit thick, you know? I'm worried he's creating expectations. At the time, I thought she was warning me. I thought she was an ally. I was a fool. She wasn't warning me. She was priming the pump. She was the one feeding my father's delusions, exaggerating my success, painting a target on my back. She was subtly stoking the flames of their entitlement, probably hoping for a nice thank you check herself when it was all over. I just didn't see it yet. That call was the setup. It was what made my father so certain that I was not just successful, but fabulously wealthy and hiding it from them. That's what led to the dinner. The one a few weeks before the engagement party, where the mask of civility finally slipped for good. It was just the four of us. My parents, Michael, and me at my parents' house. Felt like an ambush from the moment I walked in. The air was thick with unspoken demands. After a few minutes of painful small talk, my father put his fork down and got straight to the point. James, he began in his I am the patriarch voice. As you know, Michael's wedding is a very important event for this family. We have a reputation to uphold. We've booked the Westlake Country Club for the reception. It's what Michael and Sarah deserve. My mother nodded eagerly. It's going to be beautiful. All our friends will be there. Michael just sat there, staring at his plate, the perfect golden child, waiting for his prize. The thing is, my father continued, leaning forward, we've had some unexpected expenses. The final payment for the venue and the catering is due. We are short $86,000. He said it so casually, as if he were asking for someone to pass the salt. I just looked at him. $86,000. It was more than my first year's revenue. This is a family responsibility, my father said, his voice hardening. We all have to pull our weight. Michael would do it for you. I almost laughed. Michael wouldn't give me a glass of water if I were on fire. Dad, I said slowly, I can't. It's not that I don't want to help, but I literally don't have that kind of money just sitting in a bank account. Every dollar of profit is being reinvested. I just bought a new CNC machine. I have payroll for 25 employees to make. My capital is not liquid. My father's face darkened. This was the moment he realized I was going to defy him. Don't be selfish, James. This is about family. It's about loyalty. It's what sons do for their fathers. What sons do. I finally let a bit of my own anger show. I built my company from nothing. From a loan from Gerald because my own father told me I would fail. I have responsibilities to my employees, to my own business. This extravagant party is not one of them. Your business, he sneered, the words sounding like a curse. That little workshop of yours. It's time you stepped up in the real world. This is bigger than your little hobbies. That was when I knew the conversation was over. My business, my life's work, was just a little hobby to him. My success wasn't real unless he could use it to fund his lifestyle and my brother's. The answer is no, Dad, I said, standing up. I'm sorry. His eyes were cold as ice. You will regret this, he promised. I walked out of that dinner with a pit in my stomach. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. That dinner was just the rehearsal. The main performance was yet to come, and it would have an audience of 200 people. That was the history that led me to the bar at the Westlake Country Club, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. That was why, when the coffee hit my face and his hand struck my cheek, all I felt was the quiet, cold relief of a chain finally breaking. The dinner was a declaration of war. I just didn't realize the first battle would be a public execution. After I left my parents' house that night, the air still crackling with my father's threats, I did the only thing that had ever made sense when my world started to spin out of control. I called Gerald. I drove to his house, a modest brick rancher with a massive, brilliantly organized workshop out back that was the envy of every engineer who'd ever seen it. He was waiting for me on the porch with 2 bottles of cold beer. He didn't say anything, just handed one to me and gestured to a chair. Gerald had a way of listening that made you feel heard before you even spoke a word. I told him everything. The demands, the insults, the sneering dismissal of my life's work as a little hobby. I told him about Aunt Carol's phone call and the sick feeling I had that she was stirring the pot. Gerald listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the darkening sky. When I was done, he took a long pull from his beer and set the bottle down with a soft clink. "He's not asking for your money, James," Gerald said, his voice calm and steady as always. "He's asking for your power. He sees your success, a success you built without him, and it terrifies him. Because if you can succeed on your own terms, it means his way isn't the only way. It means he was wrong about you." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about control. My father had lost control over my life the moment I chose engineering over his corporate world, and he'd been trying to claw it back ever since. This wedding, this absurdly expensive spectacle, was his last, desperate attempt to prove that his values, his world of appearances and status, were still superior to mine. He wanted to use the fruits of my labor to validate his worldview. "He said I would regret it," I told Gerald, the words leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. "He's the one who should be worried about regret," Gerald said. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Now listen to me. From a business perspective, you cannot give them that money. It would be irresponsible. It would put your company at risk. Your employees depend on you to make smart decisions, not to bail out your family's vanity project. Your responsibility is to the company you built and the people who helped you build it." He paused, then added something that changed everything. "And from a personal perspective, James, a boundary is not a boundary until it is enforced. You've told them no. Now you have to be prepared to hold that line no matter what they throw at you. This is your moment to decide who you are." I left Gerald's house that night with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt before. The guilt and obligation that had been gnawing at me were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He was right. This was a test, and I was not going to fail. The next day, I didn't just sit and wait for the next attack. I took action. I called my corporate lawyer, a sharp woman named Elizabeth. I explained the situation, the pressure, the specific amount they were demanding. "This is entering the territory of financial abuse, James," she told me over the phone, her voice all business. "It's informal now, but it can get ugly. My advice is to document everything. Every text, every email, every voicemail. If he's making threats, save them. Let's hope it doesn't come to this, but if they try to interfere with your business, we need to be ready to protect it. I'll start drafting a cease and desist letter, just in case. A cease and desist. Against my own father." The thought was sickening, but it was also empowering. I was no longer just a son deflecting his father's anger. I was a CEO protecting his company. The shift in perspective was monumental. The pressure from my family didn't let up. It intensified. My mother, Mary, took over the assault. Her weapons of choice were guilt and emotional manipulation. She left me a series of voicemails, her voice trembling with manufactured fragility. "James, I don't understand how you can be so cruel," the first one began. "Your father is just trying to give your brother the best. All I have ever wanted is for my 2 boys to be close. You're tearing this family apart. You're breaking my heart." The second one was more direct. Sarah's parents are asking questions, James. They're starting to think we have financial problems. Your father is so stressed, his blood pressure is through the roof. What if something happens to him? Will you be able to live with yourself? It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was painting me as the villain, the cold-hearted son who was putting his father's health at risk. She was trying to frame their irresponsible spending as a noble effort and my responsible financial management as a cruel betrayal. Then Michael tried. He sent me a text. Just one. Dude, seriously? Just pay the money. Don't make this a big deal. That was it. No explanation, no empathy, no understanding. Just the casual entitlement of a man who had never had to work for anything in his life. He saw the $86,000 not as a massive sum of money that I had earned through years of sleepless nights and hard labor, but as an inconvenience I was creating for him. It was just a big deal I was making. That text solidified it for me. I was done. I was done being the family ATM. I was done being the villain in a story they wrote. I was done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I texted back a single word. No. I knew the engagement party would be the next battleground. I thought about not going. Part of me wanted to just disappear, to let them deal with their own mess. But Gerald's words echoed in my head. A boundary is not a boundary until it is enforced. Hiding wouldn't enforce it. I had to go. I had to face them on their turf in front of their friends and hold the line. I decided I would go to the party, show my face, be polite to the guests, and leave early. I would not engage in any arguments about money. If they brought it up, I would simply state that the discussion was over and walk away. That was the plan. It was a solid plan. But I had underestimated my father's desperation. I had underestimated how far he was willing to go when he felt his authority being challenged and his public image being threatened. I walked into that party with a strategy for a civilized disagreement. I had no idea I was walking into a public flogging. The confrontation at the dinner table was just the opening skirmish. The real war was about to begin, and my father was ready to use scorched earth tactics. The day of the engagement party felt like the calm before a hurricane. The sky was a placid blue, the air was still, but you could feel the pressure dropping. My phone had been silent since my one-word text to Michael. No more voicemails from my mother, no angry calls from my father. It wasn't a truce. It was a cold war. I knew they were planning their next move, so I spent the day planning mine. I wasn't just going to a party that night. I was heading into a potential ambush, and I wasn't going in unprepared. The morning was spent at my office, but not on day-to-day tasks. I was in the conference room with two of my best engineers, doing a final run-through of the most important presentation of my company's life. For the past 6 months, we had been in talks with Thomson Industries. Thomson wasn't just a big company. They were a titan. They built engines for commercial airlines, guidance systems for satellites. Landing a contract with them wouldn't just be a win. It would be a game changer. It would elevate my company from a successful niche firm to a major player in the industry. It would mean expansion, new research, the kind of stability I had only dreamed of. The final presentation was next week. It was everything. The CEO himself, Robert Thomson, was rumored to be attending the final pitch. He was a legend in the engineering world, a brilliant, no-nonsense leader who had built his empire from the ground up, much like I was trying to do. His approval was the ultimate validation. Going over the technical specs and financial projections that morning felt like sharpening a sword. This was real. This was the result of my work, my team's work. The clean lines of the 3D models on the screen, the precise calculations, the innovative solutions we designed. This was my world. It was a world of logic and merit. It was a world where results mattered more than appearances. It was the complete opposite of the world my father inhabited. Focusing on the Thomson presentation was like anchoring myself to solid ground before stepping into the swamp of family drama. In the afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Elizabeth. We sat in her sterile, quiet office, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of the past few weeks. "So, they've gone quiet?" she asked after I updated her. "Too quiet," I said. "The party is tonight. I feel like I'm walking into the lion's den. All right, she said, leaning forward. Let's be clear about your position. You have zero legal obligation to give them any money. None. What they are doing is coercive. Your decision to attend is personal, but my professional advice is to not be cornered alone with them. Stay in public areas. If they escalate, do not engage. Your best defense is to remain calm and leave. The moment you get in a shouting match, you give them power. She handed me a card. This is the number for a private security consultant I use. If you ever feel physically threatened, call him. It's better to be over-prepared. I took the card, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The fact that I was even having this conversation was insane. A security consultant? Against my own family? It sounded like something out of a movie, but the threat felt very real. As I was about to leave, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Sarah, Michael's fiancée. My finger hovered over the delete button. I expected another plea, another guilt trip. But the message was different. James, I know things are tense. I just want you to know I had a long talk with Michael about the budget. I told him this is all too much. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. It was the first time anyone from their side had shown an ounce of understanding. It was a small crack of light in the darkness. But it also told me something else. Sarah was getting nervous. She was pushing back. And if she was pushing back, my father would be feeling that pressure. He would feel his perfect, extravagant wedding slipping away. A cornered animal is a dangerous animal. Sarah's text, meant to be reassuring, was actually a warning. It told me that my father's desperation had just been ratcheted up another notch. He wasn't just fighting for his pride anymore. He was fighting to stop his future daughter-in-law from seeing the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. I drove home and got ready for the party. I put on my best suit, a dark charcoal gray. I chose a crisp white shirt. As I knotted my tie, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a scapegoat. I saw a man who had built something from nothing. I saw a CEO who was responsible for the livelihoods of 25 families. I saw a man who was about to close the biggest deal of his life. My father could throw insults. He could throw tantrums. He could even throw coffee. But he couldn't take away what I had built. He couldn't touch my self-respect unless I let him. And I was done letting him. I walked out of my house and drove toward the Westlake Country Club, toward the lights and the music and the inevitable confrontation. The hurricane was about to make landfall. I had my anchor. I had my strategy. I was as ready as I'd ever be. The moment I stepped into the ballroom, I felt the shift. It was like walking through a wall of cold air. The laughter and chatter seemed to dip for a second. Conversations paused. Heads turned. I was a storm cloud that had just drifted into a clear sky. I could see my parents holding court near the grand staircase. My mother in a glittering gown. My father in a tuxedo. They saw me. My father's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened into chips of ice. My mother gave a tight, pained little wave, a gesture for the benefit of the audience. I ignored them. Following Elizabeth's advice, I made a point of staying in the most public part of the room. I went to the bar, ordered a club soda with lime, and started a conversation with an old family friend who seemed genuinely happy to see me. I kept it light, talking about his business, asking about his kids. I was projecting an aura of calm, of normalcy. I was acting like a guest at a party, not a soldier in a war zone. This, I knew, was driving my father insane. He wanted me to be sullen, to be angry, to be cornered. My refusal to play my assigned role was a direct act of defiance. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. He was a shark circling a swimmer. He was waiting for his moment. I saw him talking to Michael and Sarah's parents, the Hendersons. He was laughing, clapping Mr. Henderson on the back, the perfect host. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. Sarah found me after about 20 minutes. She looked beautiful in an emerald green dress, but her eyes were filled with anxiety. "James," she said, her voice a low whisper, "thank you for coming. I'm so sorry about all this." "It's not your fault, Sarah," I said, and I meant it. She was a pawn in their game just like I had been for so long. He won't listen to me, she said, her gaze flickering toward my father. He's obsessed with this being the wedding of the year. My parents are starting to ask questions. They're practical people. They don't understand throwing money around like this. Before I could respond, Michael appeared at her elbow. Sarah, darling, your mother is looking for you. His smile was wide and fake. He refused to even look at me. He was his father's loyal lieutenant, tasked with pulling a potential ally away from the enemy. Sarah gave me one last apologetic look and let Michael lead her away. The inevitable finally happened about an hour into the party. I was standing near a dessert table when my father approached. This time, he didn't bother with subtlety. Outside. Now, he commanded. No, I said calmly, taking a sip of my club soda. Anything you have to say to me, you can say right here. This was not the response he expected. He was used to me retreating to avoiding a public scene at all costs. My refusal to be moved, to be intimidated, was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Don't you dare, he hissed, his voice low but vibrating with rage. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. The few people around us began to back away, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. You are making a fool of me in front of my friends. You're the one making this a public issue, I said, keeping my voice level. The discussion is over. I am not giving you the money. Please enjoy your party. I turned to walk away. That was his trigger. My dismissal of him, my calm defiance in the face of his authority, was something he could not tolerate. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like a vice. You will not walk away from me. His voice was rising now, drawing more attention. This was the moment, the final confrontation I had been dreading and preparing for. And that's when he shouted it. The words that would hang in the air forever. Either give us the $86,000 or get out. You worthless piece of trash. The entire ballroom fell silent. It was a complete, profound silence, broken only by the faint clinking of ice in a distant glass. Every single guest was staring. The band had stopped playing. I saw the look of absolute horror on Sarah's face. I saw her father, Mr. Henderson, his jaw tight with disapproval. I saw my mother with her hand over her mouth, a perfect picture of shock, though I knew she was a willing participant in this theater. I saw Michael frozen in place, a deer in the headlights of his own father's making. I looked my father in the eye. His face was a mask of pure rage. He was breathing heavily, his chest puffed out. He had finally gone nuclear, and in that moment of supreme humiliation, I felt nothing but a profound sense of release. He had done it. He had finally shown everyone exactly who he was. He had handed me my freedom on a silver platter. No, I said again. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. It was the calmest I had ever felt in my entire life. The sight of my calm, the quiet finality of my no, broke the last thread of his control. His eyes darted to a nearby table where his half-empty coffee cup sat. He grabbed it. He didn't hesitate. The hot coffee hit my shirt and face, the burn a distant sensation. And then came the crack of his hand against my cheek. The shock of the slap rippled through the room. I heard a woman gasp. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, my cheek throbbing, the smell of burnt coffee filling my nostrils. I slowly turned my head back to face him. I leaned in, my voice a barely audible whisper meant only for him. You just lost me. I straightened up, turned my back on him, on my family, on the whole charade. I walked. I didn't run. I walked with a steady, measured pace right through the heart of the crowd. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea. No one said a word. They just stared, their faces a mixture of pity, shock, and morbid curiosity. I didn't look back. I walked out of the ballroom, through the opulent lobby, and out into the cool night air. The sting on my cheek was real. The coffee stain on my shirt was real. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. He thought he had executed me in public. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. The 24 hours after the slap were a blur of strategic silence. I went straight from the country club to Gerald's house. He opened the door, took one look at my coffee-stained shirt and the red handprint blooming on my cheek, and just nodded grimly. "Come in, son," he said. "First things first." He didn't fuss over me. He was an engineer. He was practical. He had me stand in his well-lit kitchen while he took several clear, high-resolution photos of my face and shirt from different angles. "Documentation," he said simply. "You might not need it, but you'll be damn glad you have it if you do." Then I took a shower, washing away the sticky, sour-smelling coffee and the feeling of my father's rage. I threw the ruined shirt in the trash. It was a symbolic act. I was shedding my old skin. After that, I turned my phone off. I knew it would be a firestorm of calls and texts, a mix of furious demands and manipulative apologies. I wasn't going to engage. My silence was now my shield and my sword. Elizabeth's advice was ringing in my ears. Do not engage. Your best defense is to remain calm. And I was calm. The next morning, I went to my office. My employees saw the mark on my face, but no one said a word. They were loyal. They knew I was going through something, and they gave me the space and respect my own family never had. I buried myself in my work, focusing all my energy on the Thompson Industries presentation. It was my North Star in the middle of the storm. Meanwhile, the world I had just walked away from was imploding. I found out later, in bits and pieces, what had happened after I left. The party had died an immediate, awkward death. The Hendersons, Sarah's parents, had cornered my father. Mr. Henderson was a self-made man, a no-nonsense guy who had built a successful construction company. He had no patience for theatrics or financial instability. "What the hell was that, Richard?" he had demanded, his voice cold. "And what's this about you being short $86,000 for a party you insisted on throwing?" My father, stripped of his authority and exposed as a bully, had crumbled. He stammered, he made excuses, but the damage was done. The Hendersons left shortly after, taking Sarah with them. The official word was that she felt unwell. The unspoken truth was that the engagement was now on life support. The first direct consequence hit my family the next morning. The finance manager at the Westlake Country Club, seeing the check had not arrived by the noon deadline, made a call. Payment was due immediately, or they would be forced to cancel the wedding reception and keep the substantial deposit. Panic set in. That's when my phone, which I had briefly turned on out of a morbid sense of curiosity, started to light up. Voicemails from my father, each one more desperate than the last. The first one was pure rage. "How dare you humiliate me? You owe us this money. You will pay for this." The second one was pleading. "James, son, please, just call me. We can work this out. It was a mistake." I was stressed. The third was just the broken voice of a defeated man. "Please, James, they're going to cancel everything. Please." I listened to them one after another and felt nothing. The emotional hooks he used to dangle me from were gone. I simply deleted them and turned the phone off again. The real showdown came 3 days after the party. I was in my office conference room. It was the big day, the final pitch to Thompson Industries. My team and I were set up, our presentation loaded on the big screen. The air was electric with nervous energy. And then, the door opened and Robert Thompson himself walked in, flanked by 2 of his top executives. He was exactly as I'd imagined. Tall, lean, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. He moved with an economy of motion, a man whose time was immensely valuable. He shook my hand firmly. "James," he said, his voice gravelly, "I've read your preliminary proposal. It's ambitious. Show me it's not just theory." For the next hour, we walked him through it. We showed him the designs, the material stress tests, the production timeline, the cost analysis. It was a symphony of engineering and logistics, and my team was brilliant. Thompson listened intently, interrupting with sharp, insightful questions. He didn't just want to know what we could do. He wanted to know how we thought. It was the most intense, exhilarating professional experience of my life. We were in the final Q&A session, the finish line in sight, when all hell broke loose. The door to the conference room burst open. Not opened, but thrown open like it had been kicked. And standing there was my father. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess, his eyes were wild, and his suit was rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. My receptionist was right behind him, her face pale with panic. "I'm so sorry, Mr. James." I tried to stop him. My father ignored her. He ignored my team. He ignored the two executives from Thompson Industries. His eyes were locked on me. "James, you have to help me," he yelled, his voice cracking. "The Hendersons are calling off the wedding. The club is suing me. Your mother is a wreck. You did this. You have to fix it." The room was frozen in stunned silence. My heart was pounding in my chest. This was it. The ultimate nightmare. My unhinged father, crashing the most important meeting of my life, threatening to burn everything I had worked for to the ground. For a split second, I felt the old shame, the old instinct to placate him, to make the scene go away. And then I looked at Robert Thompson. He wasn't looking at my father. He was looking at me. His expression was unreadable, a mask of stone. It wasn't a test he had set up, but it was a test nonetheless. How would I handle this? Would I crumble? Would I engage? A new kind of calm settled over me. It was the calm of a captain in a storm. This was my ship. He was the rogue wave. I would not let him sink it. I stood up slowly. I did not raise my voice. I looked past my father and made eye contact with my head of security, a former cop who was already moving down the hall. "Mark," I said, my voice steady and clear, "please escort this man out of my building. He is not welcome here." My father's face contorted in disbelief. "James, I'm your father. Not in my place of business, you're not," I said, my voice like ice. "You're a trespasser. Please leave before I have you removed for cause." Mark and another guard reached him. They each took an arm. My father started to struggle, to shout my name, but they were professionals. They turned him and propelled him out of the room with firm, undeniable force. The door clicked shut, leaving behind a silence that was even more profound than the one at the party. My face was burning. My career, my dream, it all felt like it was hanging by a single thread in that silent room. I turned to face Robert Thompson, ready to apologize, to beg for another chance, to see my future crumble. Cleared my throat. "Mr. Thompson," I began, my voice hoarse. I am profoundly sorry. I can't possibly explain." He held up a hand, stopping me. He looked at his two executives, then back at me. A very slow, very slight smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Don't be sorry, son," he said, his gravelly voice filling the room. "I've been in business for 40 years. I've seen everything, but I've rarely seen that kind of grace under that kind of pressure." He stood up and extended his hand across the table. "I don't just invest in proposals," Robert Thompson said. "I invest in people, and I know I'm backing the right man." He clasped my hand firmly. "Let's get that contract signed." That handshake was the beginning of everything. The Thompson Industries contract wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a rocket engine strapped to my company. The 3 years that followed were a whirlwind of controlled, explosive growth. We moved out of our cramped workshop into a state-of-the-art facility. I hired 50 more people, engineers, technicians, project managers. We didn't just make parts anymore. We designed entire systems. My little hobby had become a respected, multi-million-dollar enterprise. But the success wasn't just financial. For the first time, I was surrounded by a team that shared my vision. My work life was filled with collaboration, respect, and the shared joy of solving impossible problems. I had built more than a company. I had built a community, a family of a kind, a real one. My personal life changed, too. About a year after the incident, as my friends had taken to calling it, I met a woman named Clara. She was an architect, a woman who understood the language of blueprints and the beauty of a well-designed structure. She was brilliant, funny, and had a calm strength that felt like coming home. When I told her the story of my family, she didn't offer pity. She just squeezed my hand and said, "It sounds like you chose to build your own foundation instead of living in a house that was falling down. I respect that. We built a life together, one based on mutual respect and shared dreams, not on obligation and emotional debt. We bought a house with a big yard for the dog we adopted, and on Sundays we'd sit on the porch drinking coffee, real coffee, not the weaponized kind, and just talk. I had found peace. A real, quiet, deep-seated peace that I had never known was possible. I had no contact with my family. After my father was escorted out of my office, I had my lawyer, Elizabeth, send him a formal cease and desist letter. I changed my number. I instructed my staff to never put through a call from anyone with the last name I shared. It was a clean break, a necessary amputation. For 3 years there was silence. I heard whispers through the grapevine. The grand wedding had, of course, been cancelled. Sarah had left Michael for good. The Hendersons, disgusted by the public display and the financial deception, wanted nothing more to do with my family. My father had to sell their large house to cover the debts he'd incurred trying to keep up appearances. They moved into a small condo in a less fashionable part of town. Michael's career, which had always been propped up by my father's reputation, had stagnated. Without the family name carrying the same weight, he was just another mediocre manager. I never gloated. I never felt a shred of satisfaction from their downfall. I was too busy building my own life to spare much thought for the one I'd left behind. Then, one day, a letter arrived at my office. It had been sent to my old address and forwarded. The handwriting on the envelope was my mother's. My first instinct was to throw it in the shredder. What more could there be to say? But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering, vestigial sense of connection, made me open it. The letter was from my mother, and it was exactly what I expected. It was a long, rambling narrative of woe. Your father's health is failing. His heart is weak. My arthritis is acting up. We're having trouble with the bills. Michael lost his job. It was a familiar song, just played in a sadder key. It was a guilt trip, a carefully crafted plea for me to ride in on my white horse and rescue them, to restore the family to its former glory, with me, of course, footing the bill. It was all about them, their pain, their problems. There was not a single word of apology, not a hint of remorse for what they had done. I was about to toss it, the old anger just a dull, familiar ache. But then, a smaller piece of paper, folded into quarters, fell out from between the pages. The handwriting was different. It was shaky, almost desperate. It was from Michael. I unfolded it. It was not a plea for money. It was a confession. James, it began. I know you have no reason to read this. I know I don't deserve for you to. Mom doesn't know I'm writing this. I had to say it. You were right. About everything. I spent my whole life doing what Dad told me to do. Being who he wanted me to be. I thought it was the easy path. I got the degree he wanted, the job he wanted, the fiancé he approved of. And I was miserable. I was suffocating. The truth is, James, I was always jealous of you. I was jealous that you were brave enough to be different. I was jealous that you fought for what you loved. I watched you in your garage, messing with those engines, and I saw how happy you were. I told myself it was stupid, that you were a grease monkey. But I knew it wasn't. It was real. What I had, it was all fake. When Dad slapped you, a part of me was glad. That's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. I was glad because it meant the target wasn't on me. I was a coward. I stood there and let it happen, and I will be ashamed of that for the rest of my life. My life is a mess now. Sarah is gone. I don't blame her. The job is gone. Dad is just a bitter old man. I look in the mirror and I don't know who I am. I just know I'm not the man I wanted to be. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you won. You didn't just win the money or the success. You won your life. And I lost mine. Michael. I read the letter twice. There was no joy in his words, no triumph. There was only a profound, hollow sadness. The golden child's pedestal had been a cage. His victory had been a life sentence. The letter from my mother was an attempt at manipulation. The letter from my brother was the truth. A sad, pathetic, broken truth. I knew I had to respond, but not in the way they expected. My response wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't be a surrender. And it wouldn't be a final, I told you so. It would be a solution. An engineer's solution. Cold, logical, and final. I picked up the phone and called Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I said, I need you to set up a trust. My conversation with Elizabeth was short and to the point. I want to set up an irrevocable trust, I told her. Fund it with $250,000. The beneficiaries will be my parents, Richard and Mary. There was a pause on the other end of the line. James, she said carefully, after everything they've done, are you sure? I'm sure, I said. But there are conditions. Very specific conditions. The trust will be managed by you, a neutral third party. The funds are to be used only for documented, essential expenses. Housing, utilities, groceries, and medical bills. Invoices must be submitted and approved. They are never to receive a single dollar in cash directly. Michael is to have no access to it, ever. And it must all be completely anonymous. They will never know it came from me. As far as they're concerned, it's a blessing from an anonymous benefactor or a bureaucratic error in their favor. This is not a gift. It's a closing of a door. Elizabeth understood immediately. It's a boundary, she said, made of concrete and steel. Exactly, I replied. Setting up the trust was the final act. It wasn't about forgiveness. I realized I had forgiven them a long time ago, not for their sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting them to die. Forgiveness, for me, was simply letting go of the weight. But forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to let people back into your life to hurt you again. My action was about responsibility and finality. It was the engineer in me, seeing a problem and designing a system to manage it permanently. I was ensuring they wouldn't end up on the street. Some vestige of filial duty compelled me to do that much. But I was also ensuring they could never again use their manufactured helplessness as a weapon against me. The transactional relationship was over. I had cut the cord. A few weeks later, Elizabeth called to confirm the trust was active and the first anonymous payment for their rent had been made. I thanked her and hung up. I then took my phone, found the contact for my mother I had saved under Do Not Answer, and deleted it. I did the same for my brother. As my finger pressed the final delete button, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt quiet. I felt the calm of a finished project, a solved equation. I looked out my office window at the city skyline. My father had once told me I was a tinkerer, not an executive. But I had built this. Not just the company, but the life that came with it. A life of peace, respect, and love. A life built on my own terms. My father thought value was something you projected, something you bought and displayed. I had learned that true value is something you build, something you earn, something you protect. He had lost his son over $86,000. But the truth was, he had lost me long before that, over a science fair project and a cheap plastic trophy. The slap was just the moment I finally accepted it. The real victory wasn't the multimillion-dollar contract. It wasn't watching my father's world crumble. It was that moment, standing in my own office, realizing that the noise from my past had finally faded, and all I could hear was the sound of my own, peaceful, happy life. And that was a sound no amount of money could ever buy. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.